Paul, I know it's like Groundhog Day to some extent, you and I discussing vaccinations, and I understand entirely that the HSE has been at the mercy of supply chains and I suppose deficits in those supply chains. But can you give us some kind of clarity around what we might expect from the rollout of vaccine over the next month or two?
Yeah, good morning, Ciara. And it is only a few weeks, but it seems like a long time ago since we were talking about supply lines of about 40,000 per week. And when we just look even into last week for a look ahead. Last week just finished yesterday. We had most likely over 340,000 vaccines administered in a week. 4 of the 7 days had over 52,000 vaccines administered. So really strong week as we look through. And even yesterday with the good announcement of opening the vaccines to those over the age of 39s, those at the age 39, 47,000 vaccines are registrations already up to this morning on that. So really strong momentum throughout. As we look forward, both last week, this week and the following week are quite strong in terms of supply lines. So we will be staying above the 300,000 per week vaccines administered and rolling out down through the ages as we are at the moment. So supply lines strong for the next 3 weeks. What then happens in July is we go back to forecasted levels because these 3 weeks are a function of Pfizer in particular bringing forward deliveries from quarter 3 into June into quarter 2. But then we go back to forecasted supply lines. So it does drop back to those levels of probably just around 200,000 in July. But still strong momentum as we head into it.
Okay. And I know that the previously sort of touted target of 80% of adults by the end of June is gone. But what kind of percentage by the end of June will we see? And I'm not asking this in a critical way. I'm just kind of trying to get a sense of where we're at. So by the end of June, it won't be 80%. What will it be?
Yeah, well, if you look at where we are today, I mean, there's just over 3.6 million administered in total. And that's dose ones. That's about 2.3 million, which is about 2/3 of the adult population, 66% today, if you take that. And then on the fully vaccinated, it's about 35% of the population are fully vaccinated. So that's kind of where we are today. If you look forward to the next couple of weeks, a lot of dose 2s will continue on dose 1s. So, we'll be in the region of 70 or over 70%, I expect, but we have a key focus, obviously, on dose 2s and also particularly on the AstraZeneca dose 2s in the next few weeks. So.
Now, we're about to see, I suppose, people in their 30s be allowed register on the portal, and you've been going on that stepwise way down through the age group. So we're coming into the younger cohorts now. Vaccine hesitancy is different among the younger cohorts. They know that they're not at as much risk from COVID as the older population were, and it seems that many of them are more reluctant to take the vaccine. Are you concerned about this?
Well, we would obviously monitor this as well ourselves and do regular surveys. And survey indications are still quite strong about take-up as we move through the ages. Now, obviously, we've had very strong take-up, particularly, even from the 50s up. It's been really strong. Ireland is ranked as one of the best in the world on take-up. So, obviously, yeah, we want to continue that process. I mean, the indications from yesterday are very strong, the registrations on the portal. And interestingly, over 99% of them have registered directly on the portal, so it didn't go through a kind of support line, which is kind of indicative as we're heading into younger populations. So now we would remain confident because I think there's been good take-up in Ireland. I think people want to see that continue. I think families have sacrificed so much. We do expect to see good take-up again.
Okay. Moving on to something else. We were talking earlier on the programme here, myself and Mark, about, I suppose, travel advice. We were told by the government, the Taoiseach and the Tánaiste told us about 4 to 6 weeks ago, that we were signing up to the EU digital cert for travel. That meant we were going to be allowed to travel if we had a vaccine, if we had a negative PCR, or if we had a previous confirmed history of COVID. Last week, the head of NPHET, Dr. Tony Holohan, came out and said, you should only travel if you're vaccinated. So there is a variance in the advice that people are being given, I suppose, between government and NPHET, and that's unhelpful. I would suggest to you before we even ask you a question, but that's unhelpful. Mixed messages. What's the HSE's view on this?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting one because, like with anything else with COVID, like everything else with COVID throughout, certainly NPHET and CMO give advice, and ultimately government have to evaluate that advice and make policy decisions. But there is also the individual personal risk assessment that people have always done and will always need to do, particularly in relation to travel. So from a HSE perspective, government will make the policy and that will determine policy direction. But what we would say, and I would say, is we're still dealing with a very live threat of the variant. This is not a normal summer per se. Appreciate people, particularly young people, want to travel. But if you do look what's happening around the world, the UK have just recently announced they're going to keep the restrictions on overseas travel for now to protect against new variants. Belgium have banned travel in from the UK. So fully appreciate people need a break, particularly young people need a break. But there is a personal risk assessment, that we all have to make. And the only last thing I'd say, in it, personally from a HSE perspective, I remember giving advice to government back in the early stages, and this year. And one of the strongest advice was we just can't let our health system go back to where we were in January for the public's perspective, for our patients' perspective and our staff perspective. So, we're still dealing with a very, very real life threat from the Delta variant.